Crime Club. I am here for my annual interview with the lovely Mark Billingham, where I try to and fail miserably every time. Because I'm always giddy. You know what a Dawn fan I am. And now I'm a Miller fan as well.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
So show off the book and tell us a little bit about
that.
Oh, it's backwards on my
screen. Yeah,
screen.
It's the old backwards thing. I just don't know why that is. I don't know.
You can mirror it in this camera. I'd normally have checked it with you beforehand.
Yeah,
however, I didn't because there was
all
least
right,
to see.
well, that's the book backwards, and that's the book forwards.
There we go.
There you are. What a lovely thing it is. What a lovely thing it is.
It really is.
So yeah, it's the first in a new series featuring Detective Sergeant Declan Miller. It's set in Blackpool, and it's very different. Certainly different to the Thorn books, just a little bit. It's much lighter in tone, much more comic in tone in places. Now, I'm still writing about the same stuff. You know, there's still murder and death and grief, a lot of grief, awful lot of grief.
Yeah.
But looked at in a slightly different way through a more sort of humorous prism, because I don't believe that humour and seriousness are mutually exclusive. It's quite a serious book, but it's a serious book that has jokes in, because jokes can be very serious. And you know, that's what life is like. Life is darkness and light, and you need both those things. You know, I can't read anything that's got no humour in it, or watch anything that's got no humour in it, because life's not like that. Life is full of terrible tragedy and hilarity, often at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about it. I'm enjoying writing about Miller. He's fun to spend time with. Thorn isn't always a lot of fun to have rolling around in your head, you know. But Declan is. I like Declan. He makes daft jokes and he upsets people. I like him.
He does upset people. He doesn't particularly mind doing that. Not always intentional, but he doesn't really mind. There's a lot of puns, there's a lot of jokes, there's a lot of warmth and humour.
Yeah.
He very much says what he thinks.
He said, well, I mean, you know, he's come back to work after the death of his wife, and essentially, you know, there's no roadmap for grief. Grief strikes people in all sorts of different ways. It can surprise them. It's very capricious beast, is grief. And in Miller's case, his reaction to it is a bit idiosyncratic. Essentially, he doesn't care anymore. He just doesn't care. He cares very deeply about justice. He cares very deeply about the victims, the people left behind after violent crime, because he knows exactly what they're going through, because he's going through it himself. But he doesn't care about much else. He doesn't care about how he gets where he needs to be, who he upsets on the way, what people think of him. He really, really doesn't. And that's really liberating. You know, it just makes him a joy to write, because he can say anything that pops into his head as it pops into mine, you know, which is great. So he's very uncensored.
He's very uncensored, which is really fun. I made a note that I had to keep. So I was having a glass of whatever I was having while I was reading, as I often do. And I had to stop at the end of each chapter, have a sip, and then carry on reading. I found otherwise I was going to French the book.
Okay.
There's no polite way of putting that. I was just chuckling all the way through. You don't expect to chuckle, and then it says something. I nearly printed out something to put behind the live, love, die. No, not die. Live, laugh.
Right. Okay. I'm seeing all these comments, Sam, saying.
Yeah, we'll absolutely get to them. Don't worry.
No, but I mean, there's ones about feedback.
Oh, so it must.
I was hearing an echo. Somebody says Sam must have another browser open or something. I sound fine. That's the only comment. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe it is all sounding fine now. Is it sounding fine, everybody?
So can you hear two of me again? I can still hear it.
I can only hear one of you. How am I supposed to cope with bloody two of you? Blimey.
Can you imagine my poor husband as well? Two of me. One's a little too much.
I think it sounds all right. I think we're getting away with it. You are echoing.
I am echoing. I'm not sure why. We did try figuring it out before we went live.
Yeah, you're definitely echoing. Is it like unlistenable too? Should we start again, or
shall I just hit refresh?
Okay. I don't know what happens if you do that.
I might disappear for a second, but why don't you tell our lovely audience members?
You can leave me on my own?
Just for a second.
All right then. All right then.
I think it could be you though. Maybe we should get you to refresh.
No, I sound fine, but you're echoing very badly, apparently.
Sorry, Francis Johnson.
Sorry.
I do apologize.
Go on, you refresh, Sam. I'll tell him some jokes. I will. I'll tell him some jokes.
Okay, I'm going to miss this bit then. Enjoy.
All right. You have to watch it later. Okay, I'll tell you some jokes if you can still hear me. I'm going to tell you. All right, I'm going to tell you a funny joke and a. Oh, she's back.
I'm back.
Well, I'm going to tell him anyway. I'm
not
going to tell
a
funny joke and a serious joke.
Okay, go.
Because this illustrates a lot of what went into the book, I think. So my favourite silly joke, which is an old Barry Cryer joke, which I love, which is a woman goes into a pet shop to buy a parrot, and there's a beautiful parrot in the corner, and she says, "How much is that parrot?" And the pet shop owner says, "$5." And she says, "Blimey, that's cheap. That's a beautiful parrot." And the pet shop owner says, "Yeah, I know, but the parrot comes with some baggage, got some issues." And the woman says, "What?" She said, "Well, the parrot used to live in a brothel. So, been a bit affected by that." And the woman says, "That's all right, I don't care." So she buys the parrot, hands over $5, takes the parrot home, puts it in the front room and lifts the cloth off the cage. And the parrot looks around and goes, "Oh, new premises." And the woman thinks, "Oh, okay, I see." And then her two daughters come in from school. And the parrot looks at them and goes, "Oh, new girls." And the woman thinks, "Oh, okay, hello." And then there's a key in the lock, and in walks her husband. And the parrot says, "Hello, Keith." Now that's a fantastic, silly, funny joke. But jokes can do serious things as well, make serious points. So this is a very different sort of joke. A Holocaust survivor succumbs to old age and goes to heaven, dies and goes to heaven. And there's God. And the Holocaust survivor says to God, "Can I tell you a Holocaust joke?" And God says, "Okay, go on then." So the Holocaust survivor tells God the joke, and God shakes his head and goes, "No, I don't think that's very funny." And the Holocaust survivor looks at God and shrugs and says, "I suppose you had to be there." Now that is a joke that has a lot going on. That is a joke that does a lot of heavy lifting. And I think it do you know what I mean? It just goes to show that there can be seriousness in humour. I love that. God, I love that joke. That's not a joke that's in the book, but I think it just goes to show that humour can do all sorts of things. I mean, one of the things it does in The Last Dance, I think, is mask a lot of what Miller's actually going through. And we do see, plenty of moments when Miller's on his own, or when Miller's talking to his dead wife. He has plenty of conversations with his dead wife, Alex. And I love that in the book, because I wanted to show the reader what their life was like, why he misses her so much, what a great relationship they had. So she's not a ghost, nothing supernatural going on. She's just there in his imagination, and he talks to her. She can only ever answer questions he knows the answer to, because she's in his head, But no, I very much enjoy writing those scenes.
I hadn't thought of it in that way. It's echoing again. That you're showing us what their life is like together.
Yeah,
I love that. I hadn't thought about that aspect of it.
Well, you see it in two ways. You see it in the scenes with Miller, and she's only ever there when Miller's on his own, in his house. But you see it also in the scenes with the people he dances with, when he goes back to the dance group that he and Alex were part of. And they're great. I love those characters. They're sort of like his Baker Street irregulars. They're this funny bunch of misfits. A pair of older retired coppers and this lovely old couple that run a florist, and then this computer nerd, and they dance, and then they go to the pub, and Miller sits and talks to them about the case, and they advise him in their various ways, and they come up with theories and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, they're his little gang of confidants. And I suppose the other major character in it is this young homeless girl called Finn. I don't want to say too much about her, but she plays a very crucial part in it all. And in book 2, which is done. Book 2 is done and delivered. So I need to sit down and write a Thorn book. Eek. Yeah, I know, but I don't. I haven't written about him for a couple of years. That's going to be quite interesting. We'll see.
I did wonder which characters we talk about and which we wouldn't, because there's quite a lot to discuss. Can you only hear one of me?
I can only hear one of you.
Okay. Sorry, everybody else. You'll just have to deal with double. I'm being told it's echoing. So I want to get into just how difficult it was starting a new series. Now, I know you sometimes you get a bit have more fun with Miller. You can just say what you think, and he's not quite as reserved in his Thorn is.
Yeah.
How different has it been starting a new series now after so many books?
Well, it's actually been easier, because when I started the Thorn books, I hadn't got a clue who Thorn was. I just slapped him on the page and said, right, let's see who he is, and just got to know him book by book at the same speed as the reader. Didn't know anything about him. With Miller, I knew exactly who Miller was by the time I started The Last Dance, because Miller's a character I'd been developing for a TV show for about the previous 18 months. I'd been approached by the BBC to write an original detective drama as a vehicle for a well-known comedian, who I'm not going to name, so don't ask. Thank you. And so, over the course of 18 months and countless drafts of various scripts, I got to know Miller pretty well. And then when I eventually ran out of patience with the whole TV system and process, which is so slow and frustrating, I just went, right, sod it, I'm going to write books with this guy in. So when I started, there he was. I knew exactly who he was. And I had a lot of plot. I had an awful lot of the story in my head as well, because I'd been developing it for this TV thing. The second book was a different, I didn't have any story at all, but I knew who Miller was. And so it's been great, actually. I mean, I don't know everything about him. I'm hoping he's still going to go in surprising directions, but I certainly knew enough to just crack straight into it, and I actually wrote it really quickly.
That's really interesting, because you've done lots of stories as well. So there are samples books. We've obviously got Rabbit that was more recent, and then we've got other books going further.
Yeah.
So the idea that you've lived Mount Thorn in your head for 20 years, and now you start something completely different and a completely different life. It's got so much to untangle, so much to deal with, and you've thrown him in. He's gone, into the deep end. He's gone back to work early after the death of his wife. And there is so much to look at, and then the team who are looking to Alex's death, that are keeping arms learning so much, and just in how early on that is in the book, and learn that really quickly.
Oh yeah, it's not a spoiler.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. My own voice echoed back. It's quite often. So that's. It's a lot to deal with a new character. Writing 3, 4, 5 chapters. You've learned so much about him, but it doesn't feel like anything. It's literally you're looking through ways learning so much, and learning how the team how they react to the room. Really funny at the beginning. Do you want to learn the funny? Which one about?
You mean the one where he stands on the table? Yeah, he goes back to work, and it's odd because that particular speech was one of the first things I wrote back for the TV show. He goes back to work and everybody's just stunned to see him. He should still be on compassionate leave, and he's just bored rattling around in his house. So he goes back to work and he walks in and he's trying to make light of it, like, hello everybody, and taking the piss out of people's haircuts and whatever he's doing. But people are just looking at him in an odd way, and putting a little comforting hand on his shoulder, which he really hates. And eventually he just goes, right, sod this, and he clinks a spoon against a mug like he's making a speech at a wedding. And he just climbs up onto his desk and he makes this big speech, basically saying, well, I'll let you read it. But he's basically saying, she's dead. Let's move on. Well, obviously, you know she's dead because a lot of you are at a funeral. I needn't have said that. And it's this big rambling sort of speech, at the end of which he then tries to get off his desk and he can't. He getting down is a lot harder than getting up. And this hand reaches up to help him down. And that's his new partner. That's the first time he meets Sarah Zhu, who has been, she's been lumbered with him, really. She says, I'm your new partner. And he goes, sorry about that. And yeah, they're kind of, it's a classic trope, isn't it? They're a very mismatched pair who originally are a bit funny with each other because she doesn't do jokes. She says early on, if somebody says knock, knock, I'm just refusing to open the door. I'm not going down that road. So, but eventually Miller wears her resistance down. And they will end up getting on. That's not going to be no surprise to anybody.
They are very comfortably uncomfortable for each other.
Yeah. No, I like that because she kind of says what she thinks as well. You know, she's trying to be. You know, she goes, "I'm sorry about your wife," and he says, "Not sorry as I am," and that's the end of that. That's the end of that conversation. You know, there doesn't need to be any more of that, and they just get on with it. You know, they've got a very strange murder case to investigate. Miller's first day back, he picks up this case where two men are found shot dead in adjacent hotel rooms, and seemingly have no connection with each other whatsoever. They couldn't be more different. And one of them is a sort of gangland figure who's connected to a family that Miller's dead wife was investigating. So Miller's immediately like on high alert. And then this other victim is just this poor IT guy, and nobody's got a clue what he was doing there. So off they go trying to solve this weird case together, which, you know, you won't be surprised to hear they do. But hopefully the solution to that is quite surprising.
It's quite surprising.
Mm-hmm.
More than quite surprising. And it's
Good.
We cannot
Good.
at all.
Good.
There's a lot of things about that scene that I would like to discuss, but I can't.
Which scene? Which scene?
Where they find out that there are murders.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh no, I love that scene. Because they obviously think they found the crime scene, and then this oily hotel manager goes, well, he says, "Do I have to evacuate the hotel?" And Miller says, "Well, you know, you better make sure everybody's checked out of this floor, you know, because there is a murder." So this hotel manager, as Miller and Jew are talking, this hotel manager starts opening doors and then just goes, "Ah!" And, as Miller says, this is not going to look good on TripAdvisor.
We've got lots of flows. Unfortunately, I can't see most of the names.
Now, why do some people come up as Facebook user?
They have to tick a box that gives the software that we use permission to show the name.
Okay.
Short version. So hello everybody who said hello to that. I am absolutely thrilled that you're here, even though I can hear it. Rose asked, have you produced a Spotify playlist to go with the book?
What Spotify playlist?
Have you produced one?
Oh, have I produced Spotify? No. This is not a Thorn book. It's not full of. Well, certainly there's no country music. Sorry about that.
No, but Miller, a few references to
There's the odd reference. Yeah, because Miller is a musician. So he plays guitar and piano. So sometimes he's playing piano at the dance sessions, which he does a lot in the second book when he injures himself. And he does a little bit of busking at one point in the book, where coincidentally a lot of the songs he plays are straight out of the Fun Loving Crime Writers set. So he plays a lot of songs about murder and crime. And he's a massive Beatles fan, as are all right-thinking people. So yeah, there's music does figure. I haven't gone as far as a Spotify playlist for this one. I might do for the next one.
I did write down one of the quotes. I didn't want to spoil it with loads.
All right.
Well, I did write down Sultan of Ping.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain that one? Can you remember why you
I can. It's when he
You're really good. Mike Craven needs some lessons in remembering his own books.
Oh, well, do you know what? You remember jokes. You kind of remember jokes. So yeah, that's one of my favourite jokes in the book, is that there's a regular pub they eat in at lunchtime where the food is just terrible. But like, Miller really loves the woman that runs this pub, and she kind of really loves Miller, although she pretends to hate him. She was very close to Alex, and in fact they did the catering at the funeral and all that sort of stuff. So they have a kind of weird relationship where Miller just goes in and insults her, and she insults him back. And when he's ordering food, you know, he talks about her husband, who is the chef at the pub. He's in the back room cooking the food, and he describes him as the kind of, you know, he's the rock solid gold, best microwave, you know, chef in the world. He is the Sultan of Ping, which I took the rest of the day off after that.
I would have done it. I've taken a week off.
There's a joke I'm even more fond of in the second book, which I'm just gonna spoil slightly, where there's part of the plot of the second book features a chain of fast food chain that does, you know, sort of burgers and all that sort of stuff, and they branch out into hot dogs, and in order to make it work, they have to get rid of the competition. So some of their rivals, you know, shops explode or burn down or that sort of stuff. And one of the rival shops that does hot dogs is called The Wiener Takes It All. Now that I took a month off after that. The Wiener Come on.
That's genius. That is genius. I'm very impressed. I was thinking Sultans of Swing all week after reading that series.
Good.
You know, when you find yourself humming and you think, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
Michael Johnson says, love Miller and the humour making Thorne and run for his money. Love the book.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I've been, you know, I don't think people believed me when I said how kind of nervous I was about this, because people are going, come on, 23 books. You can't, you know, you must have got used to it by now. But I mean, I'm nervous when any new book comes out. I mean, I think the day you stop caring about that stuff and worrying is the day you should give up, you know. So when it's the start of a new, you know, in a standalone, I'm always a little more nervous than I would be with a Thorne book, probably. Right. But with a brand new series, the first new series in 23 years, I was extremely nervous, hugely excited, but also absolutely shitting myself, to be crude about it. So it's been a massive relief that, you know, the book's done pretty well and that people seem to like it. You know, I'm sure there'll be people who won't. I'm sure, you know, I haven't done that stupid thing of looking at my Amazon reviews or anything like that. But you know, most of the press reviews and stuff have been positive and people have been very nice. So, you know, hooray. I might have got away with it.
I didn't need to feel like this, but I was nervous reading it because I knew I was going to be interviewing you. I was lucky enough to receive an advance copy, which I'm very grateful for. And I've been such a big fan of the Thorne series and standalones as well. That starting a new kind of.
I know. What if you'd hated it? What are you going
to do then?
Would we still have done the interview, and would you have pretended that you liked it?
Yes, but it would have been really obvious. I would have had people messaging me going, you weren't keen, were you? Whereas, that is not how I feel at all. Absolutely. I actually think me and Miller are a bit season apart.
Okay.
Which, I don't know that's a good thing to say about people. But we say a lot of things randomly. I had a list in my head, which is clearly gone now.
Right.
But I make his funny in me, definitely. I made similar jokes, but then found out that the husband was actually the one that made jokes up, so I parroted them.
Okay. Well.
So you're funny.
Well, I'm just looking at what's Joe asking me. What comes first, the story or the joke? Ooh. Well, you know, I don't just think of a joke and crowbar it in. Honestly, I don't. No, I mean, the joke has to come out of the situation. It has to come out of the, you know. So Miller will be making jokes. You know, at the first time you really see Miller do this is at the crime scene, at the murder scene, when he's you know, he walks in and there's this body on the bed and it's all very grim, and Miller looks out the window, and you know, it's terrible. It's just concrete and it's a really nasty, seedy hotel. And Miller makes a joke about how whoever booked this room needs to write a, you know, strongly worded letter of complaint about the view, and then turns around and goes, "Oh, wait," you know. So you know, I'm in the situation, and I know that Miller's going to be joking. So you know, the joke comes from the grimness of the situation. I'll tell you one more story, a true story that really the atmosphere of which I wanted to get into this book. A friend of mine is a humanist minister. And he conducts funeral ceremonies quite often, does weddings as well, but he does a lot of funerals. And he was officiating at a funeral. And it got to the bit where there was going to be a piece of music played, chosen by the deceased. So my friend who was officiating said, all right, we're just going to have a couple of minutes now where we reflect on Barry's life. And we're going to sit and listen to a piece of music that Barry himself chose. So just sit back and enjoy Barry's choice of music. Now, you may not know this, but most crematoriums, they just use Spotify. They just have a Spotify system back behind the curtain. They, you know, so my friend Mark queued up the piece of music on Spotify, and what Barry had chosen was an incredibly brooding, powerful piece of music called Atmosphere by Joy Division. But once it had been put into Spotify, what rang around the crematorium was Atmosphere by Russ Abbott, which is Atmosphere. I love a pop. What a very, very different song. Now, I love that.
I don't know the song, but I'm familiar with Russ Abbott.
Oh, look it up. You'll never forget it. But trust me, it is not a brooding Joy Division masterpiece.
I believe you.
But I love that. I kind of love that because it, you know, it's a funeral nobody's ever going to remember. It didn't make it any less sad. And people need that release of that laughter. You know, they need to be able to kind of, and I love that thing of something terribly sad and terribly fun and hilariously funny happening at the same moment. So that was, you know, that kind of thing was in the back of my head all the way through The Last Dance.
I'm going to give you a similar story. Okay.
Yeah.
My granddad's hat here. My granddad's cap.
Right.
And at his funeral, my cousin's phone started ringing, and his ringtone was the Star Wars theme tune. Is it Star Wars or something about One Way? I need to think about that story. Yeah, it was the Galaxy Far Away.
Yeah, that's Star Wars. Galaxy Far Away, Star Wars.
And that's what started playing just as they were about to lift him out of the back of the hearse.
Well, you know, sometimes people do that deliberately. My wife went to a funeral of a friend of hers, and she had chosen. She had chosen at the moment when the coffin goes through into the flames. She chose "Relight My Fire" by Take That, and I love, you know, everybody laughs because it was a reflection of the dead person's sense of humour. You know, I'm not sure the vicar was altogether delighted by it, but you know, I'm certainly going for it. I've already chosen my funeral music. It's obviously, you won't be surprised to hear it's an Elvis Costello song. And if I die a terribly tragic death, it's going to be a beautiful Elvis Costello song called The Birds Will Still Be Singing, which is a beautiful song. If I freeze to death, it's going to be Almost Blue by Elvis Costello. And if I'm hit by a bus, it's going to be Accidents Will Happen. So you've got to plan. You've got to plan ahead.
That's some planning, Mark.
Oh, no, God, yeah. There's a whole list.
Oh no, absolutely not. I can't think off the top of my head. And the songs that I would come up with would be ridiculous. I'm not quite as well as to do about musically. Don't think we need a bit of Kylie. Somebody, if you at the bar at book club, 8 cents to read a book on it. I know. Pause it for the book. It's not worth it. I don't want to reading then.
Well, I can't. Sorry, I'm not really hearing you very well. What did you say?
Right, let me try another mic. Any better?
Something about a book club.
Somebody is at a book club at the moment, and they're 8 cents through the book club. 8 cents through your book, but they had to pause the book club. And that wasn't good, so they didn't want to pause it. So I'm not going to know what book it was because we're not going to do that.
Okay.
But hopefully they'll be able to get back to yours after book club tonight.
Good.
And I know this message will be sent in the middle of my birthday.
Happy birthday.
And I'm sorry if I'm still a scorer. I do see that I am getting comments. Somebody says, I could do Black Lace.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't the theme to Red Dwarf.
Fair enough.
And this is the end by the Doors.
I know I've slightly derailed this conversation into funeral music.
Yeah, we won't go too far with
right.
it, don't worry. I'm wondering, we were talking before we went online about how you're all over the place and doing book stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you a bit about that, but I really want to know, do you get recognised?
What, in the street?
Yeah.
Occasionally, very occasionally.
Because obviously you've done TV work, comedian, author, you know, there's a lot of hats.
Ne'er-do-well, yeah.
Ne'er-do-well, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, now and again. Like locally, I tend to, you know, there's a few people who know who I am in my local supermarket or in the street or whatever.
I was watching a comedy special last night, and Nish Kumar was talking about the drummer from Coldplay.
Mm-hmm.
And how he's got all the same money as Chris Martin, and all the fame, you know, all the good bits, but nobody's got a clue who he is. And he started pointing at the audience, it could be you, probably not an Indian lady, but you never know. So it made me wonder.
Well, I mean, you know, I think it's the best thing. It's the best thing about being a writer, really, is that people don't tend to, you know, know what you look like or give us or care. Thank God. There is a bit of confusion in that I do get confused with the other Mark Billingham, the SAS guy. There's a fair bit of that stuff happens online and with emails and with books being sent to the wrong place. And I'm constantly getting emails from people going, "You're the governor, mate. Tell me how I can be a better soldier," and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, I'll have a go, but you know, I'll give you my best advice, but I think you've got the wrong one. But no, generally, I mean, obviously, you get sort of recognised if you're in a place where there's crime writers, you know, because
people will know who you are.
You're in that context. They think, oh, that's probably him. But yeah, no, I don't. There's not a lot of people pointing at me on the bus or anything.
Joe wants to know if you consider doing like Celebrity MasterChef.
Well, I am just a massive fan of MasterChef. I've been.
We are going to be missing the final shortlist.
I know. Don't. I'm recording it. No, I absolutely love MasterChef.
I think it's on
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
But I would be rubbish on it. I'm such a terrible cook. If I had to do like the invention test, you know, I'd go, well, you know, tin of beans. It would be layered. It would be toast, then Marmite, then beans, then cheese. But I still don't think John and Greg are going to be that impressed with it. I'd make it look nice, and I'd have a few lot of beans dotted around the edge of the plate in that kind of fancy way they do. But no, I love watching it. And the same with like Strictly or something like that. I can line dance. I can do a bit of line dancing, country line dancing. And I mean, I can shake a leg, but I'm no bloody ballroom dancer. God, no. In fact, that was the toughest bit of research, obviously, for the book, is that, you know, Miller is a ballroom dancer and a very good one. So I had to find out a bit about that. Not in a kind of Robert De Niro going and doing it way, just good old fashioned research way. So yeah.
I've got no reason. I would read the total picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really love the scenes, because you mentioned them. I'm going to go back to them. The scenes with Miller and Alex dancing.
Yeah.
It's memory. It's so beautiful, Mark. It's
Thank
really lovely. And you kind of just hear it and you throw into the next scene.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
But you've got to have that mix, because, like I've been saying, that's what life is like. Something unbearably sad happens, and then you start the next chapter with a joke, because that's the way life is, you know. So yeah, I do want to mix it up. I want it to be, without sounding pretentious, tragicomic. That's the tone I'm going for. It is in no way a cozy book, even though it's not as dark as Thorn, and there isn't really violence on the page. To the degree there would be in a Thorn novel, and people aren't effing and blinding all over the place, and but it ain't cozy. It certainly ain't cozy. It's tragicomic is what I want it to be.
Joe said that Blackpool's a very different comedian, can be a very place from season. How did you deal with it?
Well, Blackpool, I mean, I chose Blackpool really kind of at random, really early on in the television stage of this. I wanted coast. I knew I wanted the sea, and I wanted coast and big skies and stuff. But it could have been, you know, that could have been Devon or Cornwall, or and then I hit upon Blackpool. And as soon as I realised I'd stumbled on something kind of wonderful, because it's an amazing place to write about, because it has all this kind of slightly seedy glamour. You know, the Pleasure Beach is still the biggest tourist attraction in the country. You know, so you've got all that stuff, and the theatres and the dance halls and the pier and the arcades and all that fancy stuff. But you've also got the biggest heroin problem in Europe. You've also got more children in care per capita than any other place in the country. There's a lot of sort of crime and deprivation and stuff in and around Blackpool too. So it suddenly felt like, and it was territory I did a bit of research. I don't really think it's territory that crime writers had explored very much. I couldn't find another series set in Blackpool. So I was really pleased that I kind of accidentally picked it, you know, and it's great. And all the areas around it, all the different communities living sort of uneasily next to each other. And I found out some amazing stuff. So this doesn't surface until the second book. But Hitler loved Blackpool, right? Seriously, Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe not to bomb Blackpool, because even though he ordered
them not to bomb it. I did know that he loved it,
Yeah,
but I didn't know that he'd been ordered.
He ordered them not to bomb it, even though it was a legitimate military target, because they were making Wellington bombers just up the road, and Blackpool was always full of soldiers and stuff. But he went, no, leave Blackpool alone, because he had this idea that if he won, when he won, spoiler alert, he didn't, Blackpool was going to be some kind of Nazi playground. It really was. He was going to put a swastika on top of Blackpool Tower, right? I don't know whether it was going to spin round or light up or anything, but he genuinely, and again, once I found that out, I'm like, wow. So that's gone into the next book, and Miller has a lot of fun with that. So yeah, sometimes research can throw up stuff which is just too good to resist, you know.
It literally was handy. Yeah. I read no, I didn't read the first chapter of the second book is in the end.
Yeah, it is, which is quite unusual for a hardback. I've not
read it yet,
it's quite unusual for a hardback. We do that quite often with paperbacks. But because I was so far ahead of the game and I'd already written the majority of the second book, which is called The Wrong Hands, Little Brown said, hey, let's stick the first chapter in the back of the new book. So, yeah, why not? Why not? Things have already changed. Like one of the names of the characters in that chapter has already changed. But, you know, it gives you a very good flavour of how the next book kicks off.
And we've got this comment that Miller reminds me of my late fans. And I think that's a really lovely thing in the book. You find something really resonates with you. Because that personal level of the reader that you maybe couldn't anticipate when you were planning else. And that must be lots of lovely stories like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, all you can ask for is that your character resonates with people, and you give them a character they can engage with, even if they don't always like him, even if sometimes they find him irritating, or sometimes they go, no, shut up with the stupid jokes. They know where it's coming from. They know that everything he does comes from a good place. And yeah, I hope he's a character people will take to. You know, if they embrace him half as warmly as they embraced Thorn, I'll be very happy.
And we've got another question. Somebody was asking about planning. I think it's Sarah. The spreadsheets, notebooks, whiteboards. We see obviously all kinds of planning and non-planners, panthers. Where do you fall?
Well, I've got it here. This is the entire notebook and plan for Miller 1 and 2, and it's just a notebook that has nonsense scribbled in it. It's not a plan. It's just I'll occasionally think of it. It also has quizzes in the back that I've just written for my own amusement. But you know, it's where I'll just suddenly make notes about stuff. I thought if I think of a good line, like Miller's mate. Miller, who was Miller's mate? I was trying to figure out who Miller's mate was, who appears in one crucial scene in the book. He's kind of best friend and in the second book. And this is where, you know, Miller's mate is called Imran. He's the council gardener. They meet at the park and they go putting and what, you know, but that's it. There's no plan. I've got a whiteboard over there, but there's nothing on it. There's nothing on it other than get dressed, buy cheese, write novel. There's nothing on there.
Oh, buy cheese.
Huh?
Buy cheese.
Oh yeah, just to remind me to buy cheese every day. I don't need to be reminded to buy cheese every day because you know cheese is wonderful. But no, I'm not a kind of, you know, if you plan to that degree, and as you say, you'll talk to plenty of writers who are meticulous planners. For me, that would be just like doing homework. You know, I want to be able to have a bit of fun with it, and just go off on different tangents and, you know, do whatever occurs to me. So yeah, I have a notebook with me which I'll scribble bits of dialogue in. I can't do that stuff though when I'm doing what I'm doing now, which is on the road essentially, doing events and stuff.
Yeah, I can't. So what else have you got coming up this week?
Loads. So I just got back from Wales this morning. I had a great event with Val McDermott in Wales last night, and 2 events with the day before in Devon. So that's a lot of, you know, Devon to Wales in a car, because it was train strike. And so next week, where's my diary? My old-fashioned, look at this, an old-fashioned paper diary. So next week I am going to Blackpool, and then to a place called Fylde for a literary lunch, and then to Birmingham, where I'm doing an event back in my hometown with Mark Edwards, and then to Broadstairs in Kent. And then the following week I'm doing Bath, and then heading up to the Borders Festival in Melrose to do some book events and for a gig with the band. So busy.
Insane this though.
Yeah, it's good though. It's all good. I mean, I like it. You know, maybe there are some people who have to do this stuff and hate every minute of it, but for me, the writing is the job, and for the time being, I've done that, and now I can enjoy just rolling up on some stage and gobbing off about it and showing off a bit. I like that. You may have noticed. Just a little bit.
You're very relaxed about it, but I know you've said you still get a little bit nervous as well. But I think a few nerves are a good thing.
What you mean before events?
Mm.
I mean, I get very nervous before the band play. Before the Fun Loving Crimers play, because we're all out of our comfort zone. We're all 6 of us who just spend our lives writing books, suddenly going on and pretending we're rock stars, and that can be nerve-wracking. We just want it to go well, and we want everybody to have a good time and to dance and stuff. So we get a bit nervous. The 6 of us we have a little ritual backstage, and we do a little kind of thing together. We don't pray or anything, but we have a little moment, and so we are all a little bit nervous, especially if it's a biggie, But I don't tend to get nervous. I mean, 2 minutes before I was going on stage with Al McDermott last night, we were just drinking and laughing hysterically. We don't.
I suppose when it's somebody you know that well, it's just a chat.
Yeah, absolutely it is, and I think that makes for a better event. Because the two of you just bouncing off each other, and Val will say something, and I know, that's going to tee up that story she tells. So I'll go, what about that time you went da da da? So she'll tell that story, and then she'll tee me up to tell a story or whatever it is, and suddenly an hour's gone by, and we've barely talked about the books.
I am going to bring up a contentious issue.
Okay.
Pineapple on a pizza was a discussion from a previous book. But this time, we do sit on different sides of the fence. I love pineapple on a pizza.
Okay, this conversation is over.
Interview's over, I know, yep. There is a line in this book, and it is about a particularly hairy pork scratching.
Yeah.
Are we a pork scratching fan?
Oh, we certainly are.
But you don't like pineapple on a pizza. I don't understand you, Mr. Billingham.
What? They're completely different things, Sam. How can you equate the two things? Pineapple and pizza is just an abomination and should be an arrestable offence. Pork scratchings are a fabulous, tasty, savoury snack.
Pork scratchings.
Pork scratchings.
Would you at least put it down if it had a bit of hair still on it?
No. I mean, I used to get my pork scratchings when I was like a student from the Rag Market in the Bullring in Birmingham, and you'd get them from a proper butcher. They weren't branded. They weren't Mr. Porky's pork scratchings. They were just a big plastic bag full of scratchings from the butchers, and some of them were very hairy. But that's part of its charm. That's part of the charm of a scratching. And as Miller, there's a whole scene where Miller talks about, because he's a fan of scratchings, and he's talking about how they're as close as you can get to like eating pufferfish. That thing where you eat pufferfish and you might die. You know what I mean? If it hasn't been prepared properly, it can poison you.
From The Simpsons.
It can poison you to death. And the scratching is as close as he's willing to get to that, because he could choke on it. He knows he could choke on it, but it's worth it. It's worth it because it's such a tasty treat.
As you said, interview over.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a little bit about Gary Pope.
Yes.
The reason being, before we came on, now I've been talking to my husband, he doesn't really listen that much about book stuff, because obviously I'm constantly talking about stuff. But I talked about me and Gary Pope having a similar wardrobe.
Okay.
So when I was getting dressed tonight, he was like, yeah, I see what you mean.
Okay, but you've got a very different scalp, shall we say, to Gary Pope.
Yeah.
You've got very different things going on top of your head. I've got to say and I'm not going to say too much about Gary Pope, other than his nickname is Chesshead, and he plays a major role in it. Chesshead is a character that came to me after I was told a genuinely true story by a copper, who just told me this thing that had happened and I was like, what now? Yeah. So yeah, I just basically lifted this story from. Sometimes cops will just tell you stuff that you just go, I can't not have that. I can't not have that. And they're the stories that people go, no, there's no way that could have happened. I mean, you know when Miller is telling you the story of Chesshead and exactly what happened when he went to prison and went to the same cell, that happened. I mean, that is actually true. That is actually true. Ooh. I didn't make any of that up.
Go and buy it and read it. We're not telling you.
Yeah.
It's too good, you can't. Right, you've reminded me of something that I'm dying to ask you. And I know what your answer's going to be, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
All right.
You ever going to use Christine Treasure as just a main character?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen
Give her a series.
I haven't seen the woman who Christine Treasure is based on for quite a long time. Because again, she was a copper. She was a copper who I got to know. Who was I had to tone her down for Christine Treasure in the books. But yeah, never say never. Never say never. Anybody might come back. There are characters who appear in The Last Dance from the Thorne universe, some of whom you might not have seen for a while, who suddenly pop up in Miller's world because it is the same. It's the same universe, you know. And
I
even
said before we came on live, I'm not naming any of them because I think it's nice to discover them.
Yeah, you'll spot Tom Thorne lurking in there somewhere if you keep your eyes and ears open.
So we've got 10 minutes left. Oh, somebody's husband loves pork scratchings.
Good for you. Favourite cheese? Nice sharp cheddar. Just a nice sharp cheddar, or a nice runny, smelly brie. Favourite companion food? Tucci. I like cheese with a grape. I like a bit of cheese and a grape. Or Branston pickle. It's a nice sharp cheddar with Branston pickle. I'm a man of simple tastes, Sam.
Whole grain cracker with very blue Stilton. And some red onion chutney.
Cannot abide Stilton. Just can't be doing with it.
But you'll eat brie.
I'll eat brie. And I'll eat pork scratchings.
I'll
eat pork scratchings, but I'm not going near Stilton. No, keep that.
Oh, how can you? No, I can't even.
We're all different, aren't we? We're all different creatures. That's what makes life so wonderful.
Pork scratchings, but no blue cheese and no pineapple on a pizza. Do you like pineapple at all?
Yeah, I'll have some pineapple with some strawberries. Strawberries and pineapple. Because it's fruit. It doesn't belong on a pizza. It's bloody fruit.
Okay.
Don't get me started.
Confession time for you, not me.
Oh, okay.
Did you only start a new series so that you could get out of reading the audiobooks yourself and get somebody else to do them?
No, I kind of like reading the audiobooks. I'm slightly pushing back against going back and reading some of the early audiobooks, which they want me to do. They're trying to get, because there's 2 or 3 that we've never done, and they keep going, oh, when can you go and do the audio version of Buried or whatever it was? And I'm like, because that's, it's 3 days. It's 3 days. And it's quite hard work. And in this, I knew I couldn't do this just because I didn't want to do that accent. I didn't want to try and do that northern accent. I can get away with doing Hendrix. I can do a kind of Manchester accent and do Phil Hendrix, but I didn't want to do a kind of Lancashire accent for an entire book. So
is that what I sound like?
No, that's my. You don't. What, you're saying you sound like Phil Hendrix?
A little bit.
Yeah, you do a little bit. Who do you want to win the cup final on Saturday?
I didn't even know there was one.
Okay. All right.
Genuinely not a clue.
Man City against Man United in the cup final. That's quite a big deal. No.
Is that what they call a derby?
It is what they call a derby. It is exactly.
Do we get a gold star for knowing that?
There you go.
No.
We've got David Threlfall, brilliant David Threlfall doing the audiobook, and he's
fantastic.
I've
got to admit, I'm rubbish with names and faces. I googled because I listened to the sample on Audible, and then thought, right, Google, I was like, okay.
Yeah, Frank,
shameless. Pretty chuffed.
Oh yeah, he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. He was a joy. I'll do the next Thor when the next Thor novel comes out. I'll do that, and I normally do them, and I kind of enjoy doing them. But no, I had to. But no, I didn't. I wrote it. I wasn't writing it to get out of anything. I wrote it because the murder book ended in a place where it felt like a good time to hit pause. I'd drawn a line under a lot of issues with Thorne and with Hendrix and with Tanner, and I just thought, do something else. And I'd for a while I'd wanted to do something with a slightly more comic, soul, and and I'd had this television approach, so I developed this character, and suddenly I thought, right, he's the character I can do this with. So, and it's not the first thing everybody said was it's at the end of Thorne, and it's genuinely not. I will be starting a new Thorne book this year. Don't know what, I haven't got an idea in my head, but there will be one. And hopefully if the Miller series does well, if people like the first one and the second one, and there's going to be more, then I'll probably alternate until I've got to at least 20 Thorne novels. I've got to get to at least 20.
You're not far off though, are you? You've done 18.
I've done 18, yeah. So I'll do 19 and then I'll kill him in the 20th. I'll kill him in a brutal way in the 20th.
The thing that I love is that I have no idea whether you're kidding or not.
No, Good.
And I love that because I never know whether somebody's going to die. I'm going to just really like someone, be really drawn to them, even if they're a despicable person, even if they're awful. There's still always something endearing about them. You know, some of the worst characters are endearing, and then you kill them off, and I'm like, yeah, I'm glad you did, but
well, you have to. Every character, however despicable, is the hero of their own story. You know, so you have to make them believable. You have to make them empathetic. You have to make them, you know, not necessarily sympathetic, but there has to be something in there that the reader can identify with and engage with. Otherwise, it's just a cardboard cutout, you know.
Yeah, Joe Singleton saying "Tut Tut Sam." I'm not really sure what that's about.
He's saying what?
Tut Tut Sam.
Tut Tut Sam. Probably your nonsense about pineapple, or about not knowing what about the cup final. It's one of those. So is that the only confession? The only confession you had to wheedle out of me was?
I mean, I'm sure there's more. That was it. I thought that was kind of funny because I was sure that you'd made a joke. No, you have. You've made a joke once about being sorry that you started recording them because now you have to do all of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's. As I said, it's stupidly hard work. It shouldn't be. You're just reading a book out, right? But you're reading it out very slowly, very carefully, trying not to trip over your tongue, doing all these stupid accents that idiots like me write in the books. And it's much harder work than you think it's going to be. It's not digging a ditch, don't get me wrong, but it's, you know, yeah, I wouldn't want to be doing. I mean, there are people that do it for a living, you know, and doing it every week. No, I'd much rather write them than read them out loud.
How long have you been doing fun-loving crime writers now?
Well, the first gig we did was in 2017. So so 5 or 6 years. That was the first full-length proper gig was at the Edinburgh Book Festival in 2017. And we got a bunch of shows lined up this year. So we're off Borders Festival. Then we've got Harrogate Crime Writers Festival, Butte Noir, Bloody Scotland, and best of all, the Agatha Christie Festival in Torquay. They've booked us. I'm not sure they know what they're in for. But yeah, we're opening the Agatha Christie Festival in Torquay in September. Can't wait.
So when you started out in your writing career, did you have any idea these were the things you would end up doing?
God, no. And me and Val were talking about this last couple of days because we're by some distance the oldest members of the band. And the two of us saying, you know, never in a million years did we think that in our 60s we'd be doing this. We'd be jumping around on stages at Glastonbury or in Iceland or in Canada or, you know, it's brilliant. It's really brilliant. We are very blessed.
It's a very. Is it a weird thing for you that you are one of the biggest names in crime fiction?
Well, I think it just means I've been around a long time, Sam. My publicist produced a kind of press release a year or so ago, and then ran it by me and said, "What do you think of that?" And it said something like, you know, 20 years ago, Mark was this, you know, thrusting young maverick, you know, the new face on the crime scene, and now he's a statesman of the genre. And I thought, statesman just means old, right? That's all you're saying.
I'm more concerned about the thrusting what?
Maverick.
Thrusting maverick, okay.
Something like that. And now
Not
I'm a
statesman.
statesman.
You were, just an interesting choice of words.
Now I'm a statesman. I've just been doing it a while. And you know, the tragic, very harsh reality of publishing means that writers do tend to come and go. You can write 2 or 3 books that do really well, and then you write a couple of books that don't do so well, and you're gone. You know, it's a very tough business, very brutal business. And I've been very lucky. My first book did really well. And from that point on, it's kind of yours to lose, you know, and all I've had to do is just keep writing a book every year that hopefully, you know, just trying to write a better book. You won't always write a better book. You can't, but you've got to have that ambition. And so I'm grateful to still be here.
Well, it's not easy to hold my attention at all. And I'm still here. And 3 to 4 books later.
Yeah.
Something right.
Yeah, you're obviously. What's this tiny? What's that, Donna? Tiny violin? Why are you going?
Oh, that was me feel sorry for you for the having to do the audio books. I think it was.
Well, like I said, it's not the hardest job in the world, but it is really knackering. I promise you, it's just genuinely knackering. At the end of the day, it's like you've been, I don't know what you've been doing all day, but it's really exhausting work. And no, I wouldn't ever consider a co-write, John. I don't think. Joe, sorry, Joe. People suggest that all the time. Why don't you write a book with Val? Why don't you write a book with Michael Connolly? Why doesn't Ian Rankin write a book with Harlan Coben? Whatever. And they all sound good in theory, and they'd be rubbish in practice. And
it's that thing, isn't it? You've all been sat in a room on your own writing for a couple of decades, and now we're going to put you with people.
No, writers do not play well with others. I mean, it's fine if you're doing other stuff like the band, when actually it's a huge relief to collaborate and just, we don't really talk about books at all. And that's great. But actually sitting down with someone to write a book. And if you want, if I'm writing a book with Ian Rankin, so what? Does Thorne go to Edinburgh? Does Rebus come to London? Does one of them solve a crime on their holidays? And who's writing what? And it would be an absolute shit show. And it would be a terrible, terrible book.
And on that note, we've got 2 minutes left. Do you want to show us the cover again? I'll show you the right way around.
Show you the right way around because mine's backwards. Look at that. Da, 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 da.
It is lovely.
It is pretty, isn't it? They've done an amazing
It's
job.
really striking. It's really nice to see something a bit different.
Yeah, I love it.
Don't get me wrong, I will absolutely pick up, one of the cliche covers that everyone complains about. First thing I thought. Quite happily, I thought.
Yeah.
Something a bit different.
Something a bit different. And hopefully the book is something a bit different. Hopefully, but what are people saying? I've just realised you'll be at Harrogate this year. I'm at Harrogate every bloody year. That's not much of a surprise. Looking forward to playing Luton Town next season. You mean the Wolves? Wonderful Wolves. Yeah, of course. That's 6 points in the bag.
No clue.
No. What's happened, Sam? Did the book fall down? Oh, God, that's a bad sign. The book just threw itself off your shelf. It committed suicide.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
It actually landed, so it's fine.
Okay.
We'll just show again. Look.
Dun, 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 dun.
This is why I don't hold books when I'm live on camera, because that happens almost every time. I thought I stood it up well. Clearly not. So can you give us one that it's not a ghost?
It's a ghost.
Can you give us a little hint about book 2? We have got 1 minute left.
Okay, so book 2 is called The Wrong Hands, and it starts with a bizarre incident in the toilets at Blackpool railway station.
Why did I not start with that question?
I'll just leave it there. It kicks off with something discovered in a briefcase, which shouldn't really be in a briefcase. And hilarity and mystery ensue.
On that note, enjoy MasterChef. Do you have a favourite?
I do. Anurag. I've loved him since episode 1. He's so cute. But so is Chariot. I quite like Chariot as well.
Yeah,
if either of them
Omar was one of my favourites from the beginning, and Terry was as well, and Anurag and Chariot. They're all really good. I'm rooting for Omar to pull it back.
Oh yeah. He's been skin of his teeth a couple of times, Omar.
A couple of times, yeah. But I feel like he's waiting for his moment.
I'm just waiting for one of them to do beans on cheese on Marmite on, and just lift the trophy.
Thank you for making UK Crime Book Club and this woman who is too old to be calling herself a Southern girl.
All right.
Making part of your celebration of the last dance.
Thank you, Sam.
Congratulations on the new series. And if I was a Guinness drink, I'd raise a half for Declan Miller. Never actually tried it. I'll make sure I do that this weekend.
Half a Guinness. That'll be explained in the book.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Sam. Thank you. See you soon.